glad you're here.
I'm really glad to be here.
This is a really big day.
I know. Yeah, I'm really nervous and anxious.
Yeah. So tell me what we're talking about.
So we're going to talk about my immigration story. Just kind of how immigration has impacted my life, or I guess more like being undocumented, how that's been, a big, huge part of my life, of who I've been for so long. So.
Okay. So what I really want is for you to start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What you feel like is the most significant beginning of the whole immigration story, immigration life.
Okay. So, I guess we can just start with probably not the traumatic part, but just in the fact that, so when we migrated over, we were just coming for vacation, and my uncles were already here and they had already decided to stay. I think in that moment, Venezuela wasn't at the worst it could have ever been, but it was definitely just kind of floating. My uncle knew, I guess, in that time, the capacity Chavez had to ruin our country, and I guess he just foresaw it. I don't know, I guess God just really gave him that vision, that thought. So a couple nights before we were supposed to leave, my uncle told my mom, what is it that you want for Dory's future? Because in that moment my brother wasn't born yet. And he was like, do you want a future of success and living in a country with stability, and amazing economic opportunities? Is that what you want for her? Do you want to take her back to Venezuela and you have no idea what her future could look like? I mean, he didn't know what it could look like here, but there's just a little bit more hope, I think, staying here. So my mom, made that decision and said, you're right. That's my daughter. I want to do what I can to give her the best future I can. So we're staying, and we made, that decision was made. And from there it was, it was good. Everything was fine. I mean, I was young, so you don't really, think about being...
So that's actually an important question. So you were born in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how old were you when that vacation moment, let's vacation in America, wait a second, let's migrate to America?
When I was 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't really... I didn't really know what was happening.
Sure.
You just kind of stay and you just never go back. And I mean, I don't think that was, I don't remember even having a conversation with my mom where it was oh, we're staying. It was just we just stayed and never went back. And it was just kind of, and we had a really good friend group, and the thing is we were all illegal. So it wasn't this stigma or undocumented, wherever people want to call it, but there wasn't a stigma. There wasn't this thing where it was oh, you might want to get that fixed. It was just kind of we were all in the same boat. And my childhood was beautiful. We went over each other, and before the big event, which I'll get into in a second, but we hung out every weekend, and it was just fun. And I was a kid. I didn't know what, the word undocumented meant. I didn't know what not being from the U.S. meant, until, so my uncles had applied for asylum, which if a lot of people don't know, it's just your country is going through a really hard time or whatever, and so you apply for that because it's kind of you're a refugee. And my uncles got it, it got denied. So when it gets denied, it's immediate deportation. That's the word for it, I think.
The process.
Yeah, and I don't know everything, so if I say something wrong, yikes. But it's just kind of what I've been told, because I don't really research it, I guess. It's just what I've lived. But so they were coming to get my aunt, but my aunt was working in that moment. So the day that they decided to come get them, we had just I think we had just gotten home from school or something, and we were going to be alone for an hour or two, just because no one could take care of us, our parents were working. So we were just hanging out. We were all, as usual, kids when they're left alone, don't open the door, don't go outside, don't talk to strangers. So we get a knock at the door, and we're like, who the heck is that? We didn't have cell phones back then. So, like...
And at this point, how old were you, do you think?
If I remember correctly, I think I was, like, 8. So I was pretty young.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, looking through the window, and, you know, because that's what we did. Even when we had our parents at home, we were like, oh, look through the window, see who's knocking at the door. And we were, like, shocked. Like, they were all in uniforms, and we were like, oh, my gosh, like, what is this? Like, what's happening? And we just thought it was the police, which is what we told our parents, you know. We were like, we ran up the stairs, and once they saw us, they started knocking, like, harder and harder, and they were yelling, like, open the door, like, we're gonna come in, like, you can't hide, like, all those things. And it was just like, and, like, we were calling my mom, and I was like, Mom, like, there's cops outside, like, I don't know what's happening. And we were looking through the window, and they could see us. They were surrounded. It was so many of them. So, like, they were looking at all our windows, and it was, I don't know, it was just, like, so crazy. So, like, I remember my aunt was in that moment when you used to, well, I think even now when you apply for asylum, it's like you get a social security number to work, and then a worker's permit so that you can work while you're waiting for your case to, like, be processed and stuff. So they had that. So my aunt was like, well, I'm the only one that, like, has, like, a driver's license that's valid. Like, let me just go by myself. And she dropped my mom off, like, at, like, the gas station close to our house, because, like, my mom didn't have anything. So she was like, I don't know what's happening. Like, we just need to go home. So my aunt pulls up, and obviously, like, they were coming to get her. So
even though she had all of that documentation?
Yeah, because it was like her case was the one that was, her and my uncle's and Issa's case, like my cousin's case, were the ones that was getting denied.
Wow.
So they were coming for all 3 of them. So it didn't really matter who they got first, which Issa was she was the one with me, my cousin. And she, like, I remember my aunt saying that she was, like, outside, and they were, like, cuffing her.
Wow.
Like, as if she was a criminal. And I remember her telling the immigration officers, like, please take this off of me. Like, these are my girls. Like, these are my daughters. Like, I don't want them to see me like this. Like, I'm not a criminal. And they, the guy was like, I don't care. Like, and they finally got him off of her after she asked, like, persistently. But they were like, my aunt didn't know English, so she didn't know what, like, a lot of them were saying, except for, like, the Hispanic guy. He was, like, translating everything for her. And they were like, who else lives here, like, all this stuff. And I mean, obviously, like, I wasn't. So the immigration officers, they had, like, a permit to, like, do this, right? So, like, to come in the house and come get them. But I wasn't in the permit. So if they took me, it would have been, like, so bad, because I was obviously undocumented, but it didn't matter. Like, in that moment, it doesn't matter. Like, I was a minor, and they can't take anyone other than who they're looking for. At least that's how it used to be whenever this happened. And so, like, I remember the officer, they were, like, yelling at my cousin and I, like, and they were telling, like, someone has to come get her, but it has to be her guardian, like, it has to be her mom. And, like, my mom was like, I can't go. Like, it's a bunch of immigration officers. Like, we're both going to get deported. Like, and the officer just, like, telling me, like, in my face, being like, your mom needs to get her ass over here, or, like, I'm going to lock you up in a camp, and you're never going to be able to see her. And you're only going to see her once a week, and it's going to be through a screen. And so basically just, like, installing fear in me so that I could push my mom. And I remember being on the phone being like, please come get me. And he was like, your mom doesn't love you. She doesn't care about you. She doesn't care if I take you. And, like, that's not true. Like, my mom does love me. And, like, she was scared, as, like, it makes sense.
But you're an 8-year-old, like,
yeah,
all of this with the officer saying what he's saying to you, saying with the tone he's saying to you.
Yeah.
And being alone in that moment, knowing I'm an 8-year-old, I don't know what any of this is.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, my aunt was, like, telling us multiple times, like, you know, in Spanish, like, don't listen, like, look at me, just look at me, like, stay focused, like, look at me. And, like, like, obviously, like, how are you supposed to, like, look at her when you're being yelled at?
Yeah.
So finally my mom came in and, like, got me, and she had to like prove that she lived there and that she was my mom, because they had gone through all our stuff. Like, we had a 2-story house, and like they had already gone upstairs and like looked in through our rooms and our closets and like all that stuff. I'm guessing they were like looking for my uncle, and he was at work, so like he couldn't, like they didn't find him. So then they left, and they wouldn't tell us where they were taking them. Like, my mom kept asking, like, please tell me, like, I just wanted to know that like my sister's gonna be okay, like all these things. And like and then finally, like at nighttime, they called. And like, she was okay. They were okay. They were like in a hotel. And because Issa was a minor, it was just like a lot harder, because I mean, even though they were like taking them away and like in a way like separating them from us, they still respected the fact that she was a minor. And that like in that moment, that was like the most important thing. So they ended up putting her in a hotel that night, and then I don't remember like what facility they shipped them to, but like I remember her telling me like it was like a camp for like kids and my aunt, and so they could be together. And there was like schools and stuff like that, so that they didn't miss school, and there was like activities and all these things for them. But in that moment, like, my uncle didn't come home because like, they would have taken all of them. And Kaylee and Lala, which was my cousins, like, which is their kids, they were babies, like they couldn't be like away from their parents. So like and like Lalo, out of all of them, is like the most attached to my aunt. So like that was just like a hard night overall, because like we were all hiding in my uncle's, I don't want to use the word hiding, but I guess like we all were in my other uncle's house, like sleeping on mattresses, like making sure that we all stayed together, like calling everyone in Venezuela, like letting them know what was happening, like here in the States, like letting them know, like all our friends. And I think they were there for a couple days. I don't remember how many days, but we finally let them go because like Kaylee and Lala both have like severe asthma, and so they were like talking about how they like couldn't be away from their parents, and my aunt was the only one who knew how to treat them like when they had their like severe attacks and stuff. So they finally let her go. And the thing about my uncle is like, which like I commend him for this, like he didn't run, like he literally didn't, like he got up and like went home, like went to work the next day, and we went back to like living our lives. Like for like a couple days it was sort of normal, and then they came and like got him, and they got him at work. They found him, and then, well, found is not really the word. I guess they just like picked him up, like because he wasn't hiding. And then after that, finally, like my uncle stayed there for probably like a couple weeks to a month. He wanted to wait. He didn't just like immediately ask for deportation. He wanted his case to go through. So it was still denied. And my aunt finally told him, like, we all have to go. Like, I'm not leaving without, because she could have had the option to stay because of her 2 kids, because they were American citizens and they had severe stuff. And
so there were 3 kids. One, the oldest, got taken with the aunt.
Yes.
And the other 2 stayed with you and your mom.
Yeah.
The rest of your family.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so hard. Okay, so when he went back, your aunt and your oldest cousin went back too.
Venezuela, yeah. And all of them, actually, they all went back. So the 2 little kids. And,
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's just weird because they're here with us now. But, like, yeah, they went back with them. Because it was just, like there wasn't, we couldn't separate them. You know what I mean? Like, as you shouldn't. Like, they're a family. So then after that, like, my mom and I moved into our own apartment, which was all in all, like, harder because she wasn't making enough to like sustain us like by herself. So then we moved in with my uncle, and then life went by and a lot of things happened, and then we ended up in Alabama, which is where I think it was more prominent that I was undocumented. That's when I hit high school. That was the moment that I think I finally realized like how scared being undocumented could feel. So since I was a kid, like you know, you're always taught, like, as a undocumented kid with family undocumented, you don't talk about it. You don't tell people. You don't, like, that's not something that you do because you're not allowed to do it because you don't know who could, you know, call immigration, who could just be like, hey, we have this person here, come get them. So as, like, I remember, like, sharing to my cousin one time, like, because it was a part of who I was, and I didn't want to continue to hide it, like, with my friends, you know? And I was, in that moment, I was, like, 10 when I ended up sharing it to, like, my best friend or something. Like, my cousins had left, like, you know, they got deported. Like, I was, like, as a kid, you long for a connection, and my connection was my cousin, Issa. Like, we were sisters. Like, we were literally, like, did everything together. Like, they dressed us like twins, like, since the moment we were born, like, we were, like, inseparable. So I, like, told some close friends, like, our immigration status, and I remember I let my cousins know that I did that, and it was like I don't even know, like, I had ran someone over. Like, it was so bad.
You told your cousins that were back in Venezuela.
No, my cousins here.
Oh,
who were,
okay.
like, the same age as me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I told them, and I was like, I just, like, let them know, and they're like, you can never do that again. Like, you are going to get deported. You are going to get sent back home. Like, you are, like, you're going to ruin your life. Like, and we were, like, 10. Yeah. You know, and, like, imagine thinking, like, if someone finds this out, like, they're going to ruin my life. So I never, in that moment, I told myself, like, I'm never telling anyone again. Like, I'm risking, like, getting deported. Like, I cannot, nothing is worth that, you know? So, so then after all that, like, going back to, like, the moment we were in Alabama, I think I realized how much it began to define me when I was in high school. Because you're immediately bombarded with, like, college and driver's license and, like, trips and summer's coming up, and I couldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't, like, drive. You know, my friends got their permits and I didn't, and, you know, they all started driving at 16 and I couldn't, and I had friends invite me to family vacations and I couldn't go to, and, like, you know, when people would talk about college, I was like, yes, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to do this, and it was like, that's what I would tell myself, but I didn't know that that was true, because I knew of my immigration status. I knew that I legally couldn't go to school. So I began my immigration process with my mom because she got married to my stepdad, and they did it together. And then my mom decided to divorce him before she, like, but we were, like, poorly, like, we had an immigration lawyer who was, like, doing all her paperwork, but, like, he wasn't a good one, so he didn't guide us correctly as he should have. So he told my mom, like, oh, you can just, like, petition for Dory later. She doesn't have to go in your case, which is not the case. You're supposed to put me in, like, together so that we both could have gotten everything together in our residency together. So, you know, at some point, my mom ended up divorcing, like, my stepdad, and, you know, I obviously still had a relationship with him because he was my stepdad, so, like, you know, he came to things, but it was still, like, separate. So my mom started my immigration process with her when I was a freshman, and we got, you know, we got a lawyer, but I remember walking out of every single conversation I had with, like, my lawyer just in, like, desperation of, like, crying, because it was, like, it just seemed impossible. Like, it seemed like it was never going to happen, because it was always, like, no, well, you need this. No, well, you need that. Well, you need this and you need that. And you don't have a sponsor, and you don't have, like, you can't afford technically afford to sponsor your daughter, which I was like, what the frick? Like, you can't, like, well, you're a resident, not a citizen. So, like, Dory's going to have to go out of the country and do her immigration process. And it was like, what? No, like, you can't leave or you can't come back in. Like, so it was like,
It felt like contradicting information.
yeah. And I was like, well, can you promise me that the immigration officer isn't gonna, like, deny me and leave me wherever I am? And they're like, no, I can't. I'm like, so why would I spend here my whole life running and like not making mistakes, not running red lights for what? For me to go to a different country and get stuck? Like, no, like I'm not doing that. So, but we were hopeful, and we would call and talk to people, and they're like, no, you can do it. You can do it from in here. Like, it's totally fine, which is not true. Like, but we were like, we didn't know better, like, so finally I got my appointment probably like my senior year of high school, to like go like with my mom. So
what was that like, the entire, like your whole school career, and when you were getting all that information and meeting with a lawyer and calling all the people, was that something that took up like a huge portion of your like daily life, or what did that look like?
yeah, so it did. It took up like just being undocumented took up so much of my high school career. There was like school Dory, and then there was like home Dory. There wasn't, and it didn't ever combine, because I wasn't allowed to talk about it, and I wasn't allowed to tell anyone. And I went to a private school, a very small private school, and like, which I was like very much so the minority. Like, even people who were Hispanic like had no idea, like, you know what I mean, like what I was going through. So I never shared it with any of my friends. And like, I mean, like, how can you share it? When I was freaking in government class being told like, immigrants are like the worst thing that could happen to America. Like, you guys are trash, you're rapists, like you guys are like, just come here and you're lazy and you don't work and you steal our jobs, and I'm like, I would look at that guy and be like, I have better grades than you, and like, I'm in more extracurricular activities than you, and I have a bright future. I just don't have a social security number that like defines that and like can open that door, but I bet I could kick your butt in anything. And like, it was so frustrating, because it was like, I would stand up for it and be like, no, like, you can't say that. You cannot say that. Like, you don't know anything. You don't know anyone's story. Like, you have no idea. And I would tell them, I'm like, you don't even know like who's beside you. Like, the person beside you could be illegal. And like, I was obviously talking about myself, and like, and it was just, I had best friends, like girls who are still in my life today, like who like would talk about like undocumented people like we were like literally the scum of the earth. Like I know the legal term for undocumented is like illegal aliens, but that it's used not as a term to just be like, oh, the document, like this is what it says, but it's like literally like calling us aliens. Like, I'm not from outer space. Like, I'm literally like more American than I am Venezuelan. Like, why do you think like it's okay to do that? And I remember telling like my best friend, like, you cannot say that. And she's like, well, that's what they call them. That's their name. And I'm like, no, that is not their name. That is not my name. Like, I'm not an illegal alien. That's the worst thing you could say. Like, I'm a human being. Like, I'm a child. I'm a kid. I'm a high schooler. I'm me. I'm Dory. Like, I'm not like this horrible name. This doesn't define who I am. But in that moment, that's all I could think of. And every moment I was like, can't slip. Like, remember the lie you told the other guy, like, why you can't drive? Like, oh, because I'm Latina and my parents can't let us drive until we're 18. And so it was like, oh, everyone knows Dory can't drive until she's 18. So, like, making sure that the lies that I was telling about, why I couldn't drive or why I couldn't fly on a plane or why I couldn't do certain things, I had to remember them. So that I wouldn't, have a moment of like slip up and like someone question what I was saying. And it was hard because there was one person in my entire school who knew because our parents were friends. And even in one moment, she like used it against me and was like, I'm going to tell everyone. And I was like, you cannot tell anyone. Like, that is my worst nightmare, to like have people find this out. Like, I'm too, like, literally there's like school Dory and home Dory, and they cannot combine. And in that moment, it was like for me, my nightmare was that, to like get like, for someone to find out.
And did it feel like it was the judgment because you had heard like the things they would say about it, people immigrating, or was it the fear of going back to a country that you had no connection to because you'd been there from 0 to 4 and that's it?
Yeah. So I think for me it was like a little bit of both. I think it was the fact that like, which I had been back in Venezuela before, like in the span of like high school and the kids. So I had friends, but that it was such a hard experience. I didn't freaking even know how to read or write in Spanish. Like,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah.
so it's like, but I think it was a little bit of fear of rejection, of like, everyone's gonna look at me like I'm this horrible human being who like doesn't have papers and like, which is what it's called, I guess, or like documents, and like they're gonna hate me. Like, everyone's gonna hate me, and they're gonna like say these things to me, and they're gonna say them to my face. Like, they're not gonna use like illegal or undocumented as like the word. They're gonna say like Dory. And so it was like, I was so scared of like, literally, I don't even know, like, I guess getting bullied about that, and like, you know, people calling immigration or telling them, and it's like they couldn't even do anything. But because I knew they couldn't do anything because I had a like, even if they called immigration, they would be like, well, she has a process going. I'm not deporting her. I can't deport her. Like, legally, they couldn't do anything. But I was so, like, fear was the only thing I would ever feel. So, like, I didn't care, like, what the technicalities looked like. It was like, no one could find out, or this is going to be, like, the worst thing ever. And I remember, like, my senior year was approaching, and I still, like, wasn't legal. Like, I still was, like, I hadn't heard anything from immigration. I was, like, and I literally, like, I got depressed. Like, I literally, like, I remember my junior year, like, all I would do was, like, drink and drink and drink. I was so depressed. I would cry at night and literally be like, I would talk to God and be like, I am so mad at you. Like, I do not understand why you're punishing me. Like, that's all I would ever ask God. I'm like, why do you hate me? Like, this is all I want, is to, like, be legal and go to school and be normal. And, like, why do you not want that for me? Like, why? Like, why don't you want me to blend in and, like, go to school and have an education? Like, I was like, that's all I want, God. And it wasn't his fault. Like, we live in a broken world, but, like, in that moment, I literally didn't understand. Until finally, like, you know, like, I finally hit rock bottom, and, like, I ended up in the hospital and, like, destroyed my stomach of how much, like, alcohol and cigarettes, like, I was smoking, and, like, all these things. And I was just, like, you know, finally my mom was like, you cannot keep doing this to yourself, you know, like, and then I went on a church trip and I got saved, and it was like, I mean, I was still angry at God, but, like, I could feel him, and I knew, like, that he was there with me. And so in that moment, like, I began telling my friends, like, my senior year, like, only my close ones, and I was like, and I think I learned the courage to tell my friends because I found out that another guy in my, like, the class above me, he was illegal also. Mm-hmm. Or, like, he was on DACA or something like that. And people knew, and, like, his close friends knew. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember how I found out. And, like, I mean, it was a little bit of everything, but in that moment, I remember texting him, and I was like, why, like, how did you get the courage to tell your friends that, like, this is who you are? And in the moment, he was like, is this a joke? Like, are you, like, playing with my mind? I was like, no, like, I'm serious. Like, I'm also illegal. And, like, he was like, I don't know, I just did it. Like, I just told them, and I was just honest with them. And that's when, like, everything began to change. I, like, told, like, all my close friends, and even my friend who was, like, like, oh, in my face about it. I remember telling her, and she was just like, why didn't you ever just tell me? And I was like, what do you mean? Do you know the way you talk about undocumented people? Like, how did you think I was going to feel comfortable telling you anything? And she was just like, Dory, it doesn't change, like, how I look at you. Like, it doesn't change, like, who you are as a human being. Like, I still love you. You're still my best friend. Like, I'm still here for you. Like, and in that moment, I was just like, I have been driven by fear for 3 years. My entire life, but especially my high school career. Like, and all I had to do was, like, tell them, like, I was like, what? And obviously, like, not the whole school knew. And I was still lying to a lot of people. But I was being honest with those I felt safe to be honest with. Yeah. And so, like, my guidance counselor, like, I was, as you know, like, achiever. Like, I'm like, so I was in her office, like, every semester, like, oh, like, colleges talking about it. And I remember she would, like, tell me all the time my senior year, like, Dory, Auburn opened their application process. Dory, blah, blah, blah. Is like, I haven't seen that you requested your transcript. And it was, like, in front of everyone in a hallway. And I was like, can you just shut up? Like,
so she was the school guidance counselor, but she didn't know your status.
Yeah. Because legally, technically, no one can know. Like, the only one who probably knew was, like, the person who, like, processed documents. So, because it's, like, I mean, people don't question it. Because, like, people don't know that you're allowed to go to school from, like, kindergarten to high school if you're illegal. Because it's, like, the law. Like, kids have to go to school. So, like, you have to go to school. So having that, I remember I went into her office and I sat down and I was angry. I was like, I am literally undocumented. I cannot go to school. So can you stop telling me that I know college applications are open? I get the emails. I read on it. I hear my friends talking about it. I know. Now shut up. And, like, she was so, like, taken back. Like, she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And, like, in that moment, she literally was like, I don't remember if it was in that moment or she called me in later, but she was like, Dory, I want you to know that, like she loved me. And that's the thing is, like, I didn't really know. And she was just like, they're going to have to take me over, like, to take you, they're going to have to, like, go over my dead body. Like, they're not taking you. I will hide you. Like, it doesn't matter what I have to do, but, like, they're not coming to the school and taking you. And that for me was like, I was like, wow, like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, I never thought, and for my teachers, that was not a thing that I would, like, share with any of them. And then I shared with, I even had, like, I was honest with some of my teachers, and, like, it was very redeeming. Like, it was, like, a lot of them were like, oh, Dory, like, okay, no worries, like, that's not, like, just encouraging things. I can't remember, I graduated so long ago, but, like, but one of them even, like, signed, like, as a witness for my immigration stuff with my stepdad.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was, like, it's so crazy that, like, for so long I hid it. Like, I was so embarrassed. I think until this day, I think, like, that's why I wanted to do this video, because I was like, I'm still embarrassed that was, like, such a big part of my life.
So you still feel emotions about that was part of your life. Mm-hmm. But was it the part that you were undocumented and dying in the isolation of feeling like you couldn't tell anyone, or the actual fact that you were undocumented?
I think it is the emotion of it more than, like, now that I think about it, because, like, I'm not embarrassed to say, like, oh, I'm a resident, like, I'm not a citizen yet, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not embarrassed to say that, or, oh, yeah, I went through an immigration process, but I think there's still that side of me that's, like, can't tell anyone, like, can't talk about it, it's a touchy subject, like, people can't find out, but it's, like, obviously not who I am, like, it cannot define me, it's not, people know me for what I am, and it's, like,
you just got so used to
yeah, and I think I think it's like the embarrassment of like that I felt in high school, you know, that I was like, I'm so embarrassed that I'm not documented. I'm so embarrassed that I like have this thing and I'm not like everyone else, you know, like I'm the outsider. I'm like the immigrant. And so it was like, I think for me, talking about it is so hard because it brings up again that like embarrassment feeling, the fear that I felt, like perpetual fear, like literally all the time.
Of people finding out.
Yeah.
Because even though, so at that point, the process had begun. So you couldn't be sent back to a country you didn't know. Mm-hmm. But it was, what's going to happen if people know? What is the judgment going to feel like? Mm-hmm. And will I be alone if they find out, you know, who I really am, which has been deemed in my mind something that is unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I let it define me for such a long time, you know. And what should define me is that I'm hilarious. But like I don't know, it's a lot of emotions like with it. And I think, you know, it didn't stop in high school. You know, I wasn't like legal in high school. Like my process was actually starting again.
Wow.
So my senior year, I got my interview with my mom. And it was like, oh my gosh, like so exciting, which is to me a little bit frustrating with the process, because I shouldn't have gotten that interview because there was nothing the officer could do. Because that's not how technically the process is supposed to go when you're a resident. Like, you're not supposed to do it from the U.S., but you're supposed to do it in another, like, outside the country, in another embassy. Oh. So I don't really know, like, what slipped through the cracks, but I think it was a God thing. But I remember we went to the interview and, like,
so the interview was with an immigration
officer. Yeah, so I was with my mom, and he was dressed like a normal human, you know, like it wasn't like he was you know, like his officer I was gonna say costume, but like his officer gear. But we went inside the interview, and I had everything, like literally everything. And
what's everything?
Like the documentations he needed to prove that I was like my mom's daughter, I lived here, I went to school, like all the good things. Mm-hmm. And I remember like he was looking through my things and he was like right now I could just boop, stamp it
as approved.
Yeah, but he was like, but I can't. And I was like, why not? Like, what are you talking about? Like, why can't you do that? And he was just like, because I just can't. Like, I cannot do this for you. Like, this is not how this works. This is not the way that you were supposed to, like, the route you were supposed to take. And I was like, why not? Like, you literally have all the power to do it. And he was like, and that's whenever that conversation came up where he was like, I can't approve it, but I'm also not going to deport you. And I was just like, well, thanks. Feels really safe that you, and, you know, and he's like, the only difference between me and the border officers who take people away is that I'm not wearing my uniform. And I was like, okay. And he was just like, so he was like, I just need you to lay low, like, drive. If you're going to drive, don't run lights. Like, literally live like I am a criminal. Like,
oh my goodness.
You know, and he was just like, and don't you go off getting married to anyone for papers, and like, don't you, like, and I was like maybe like, 17. Yeah. Yeah. I was like 17 years old. And I was like, which I knew that's how that works too. Like, that's the world we live in. Like, I'm an immigrant. Like, I know the stories, but like, I was like, I just want to go to school. Like, nobody's here looking to get married, you know, like, this is ridiculous. And it was crazy because he said that to me, but in a way, like, I also believe, like, God's hand was in it, because he literally was like, he started looking up resources that could, like, help me, like, immigrant resources, and, like, churches that had, like, lawyers that help immigrants, and, like, started looking at, like, the DACA rules, and, like, if I applied, and, like, how I could he was just like looking up all the resources, printed out a bunch of papers and then gave it to me, and he was like I'm not going to deny it right away. Like, I'm going to talk to my officer. I'm going to put it on review. He was like, just know that I'm not going to like send you off and deport you. He was like, you just have to stay low. And I was like, okay, well, I guess like thank you for like not deporting me, but like this still sucks. Like, this is not a good answer. And like I remember like walking out of it in like tears, and like my mom never cries like ever, and she was like bawling with me. And she was just like, I was like, Mom, like I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I do not have another way out, you know. And it was like, I was like, I'm not gonna go to school. I'm not like, I'm just gonna, what am I gonna do? And she was like, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out. I was like, what are we gonna figure out, Mom? Like, what route? Tell me, like, what are we gonna figure out? And it was just like, the interview was in Atlanta. It was like 4 hours away from like where I lived, and it was just like the saddest like car ride I've ever had. Like, I was literally felt like someone had just like killed one of my family members. Like, I had no idea like what to do from that moment. Yeah, I was like,
because he didn't give you. He just said the way you did it was wrong, but here's not how how you need to do it. Was there?
well,
just
we knew
like,
how to do it. We just didn't want to take that route, and we
because
thought
you
that
could
there
get
was.
stuck.
But we thought that there was, because we got the interview, we thought that the possibility of doing it from in here was available to us, and it wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah, so then after that, like, you know, I went through my senior year, and then I finally was like, well, like, I can't, this is not going to change. Like, this is not going to change anything, you know, like, this is who I am right now, like, and I cannot continue to, like, hide this, and, like, I mean, in that moment I hid it, but not from, like, the people that I loved, and so it was, like, yeah, I just didn't want to keep lying to everyone that I loved, and I think overall I just, like, it's not fair, you know, to them, to, like, to their hearts, like, to know who I am, you know, it's, like, all we want to do is be known, so I, like, started telling, like I said, like, my close friends, and, you know, all of them were, like, super, just, like, I love you, and you are who you are, and, like, I know who you are, and I know your heart, and this doesn't change anything, and, you know, telling my professors, like, it was always met with, like, love, and, like, and I would hope that, you know, telling them that, because I had a really good relationship with, like, most of my professors, the ones who maybe agreed with the comments that my classmates had made, that they would be able to begin to have a different conversation, or, like, a different thought. But then, you know, I graduated high school, I just started working, and it was still a lot of who I was, but I was working in more of, like, I was working with more undocumented people, so it wasn't abnormal, you know. I think it was the first time that I've ever felt known in that sense of, like, that side of my life, because it wasn't a stigma, it was just who people were, like, it was just part of their process, and so I think it was really redeeming to see that, because I think, you know, Jesus putting me in a position where it's like, you know, you're not alone, like, this isn't something that you're just, like, this is not just you, it's not just your battle, like, this is very common, and it's normal, and you're not this, like, out of space, like, human being, like, you're like, just like everyone else. And so I remember I still struggled so long, like, with it, and it was such a big part of who I was, because I couldn't let it go, until I literally had a conversation with Jesus. And it's so crazy. I was in the bathroom of, like, one of the places I was working at, because I was working 2 jobs, and I remember telling Jesus, I was like, I am sick and tired of this. Like, I do not want to carry this burden anymore. If America is not the country that you want me in, then take me out. because I'm done. Like, I was like, if you want me in Europe, if you want me in Venezuela, if you want me in Colombia, like, I don't know where you want me, but if this is not the place that I need to call home, then just do something about it. Like, send me somewhere else. And I walked out of that bathroom to a text message from my stepmom, and she was like, hey, we just received your residency. Like, come get it. And I was like,
Wow. Because you had been going through the process with your dad
yeah,
on
my
his
stepdad,
end.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The timing of that.
I know. God was like, here, just like,
Assurance.
just really needed to carry it.
Gift.
Like, this is, yeah, it was so, and I was just like, what? Like, I didn't even know what to say, or like, I was just like, and the thing is, like, my case was so, well, by what my lawyer told me, like, it was very abnormal because my parents were separated and I was already like, you know, older, and my stepdad, like, you normally petition for your stepdaughters when you're married or your stepson, but not separated. So I had to prove to immigration that like my stepdad was still in my life. So it was like thousands of pictures and witnesses and like people writing letters and signing, and like it was this huge thing because like, and I think in some cases you have to go for an interview like with your stepdad together to like prove your relationship. But like for me, my lawyer was just like, send everything. Like he was like, send all the evidence, every document, everything that you would normally go through a process with. He was like, we're sending it all and we're not going to like hold back. And I remember him telling my mom, like, I'm going to win this case. Like, he just, I don't know, it was just like such a gift, like it was such a God gift, really. Like, he told me, he was like, I'm going to fight this battle, like, with you, and like, I'm not going to lose this case. Like, we're going to win this case. And he did everything he knew to do, and he did his job really well. And, it did cost me everything, all my savings, everything, but like, it was worth it, like 100%. And so it was just like everything that I went through for the feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I did it, like legal, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, yeah. So now we're here.
So where is it from here?
Well, now it's just like residence, so you just kind of like have, your green card, you can work, you can fly, you can do anything.
You can go to college.
Yeah, I can go to college,
Wow.
get an education. And I also, like, once I become a citizen, I'll be able to, like, get my U.S. passport and be able to vote and do all the good things that...
Is it more waiting in the process, or more, do you have any other type of interview, or, what does that look like for those of us who don't know?
So after, so because mine was to my stepdad, it was, I could have gotten like a there's like temporary residency, so it could be like a year. I think there's a 2-year one, and then there's like a 10-year one. But if you get the 10-year one, you don't have to like do anything further. So you don't have to like go to interviews or anything like that. You just basically like, you can renew it. Like, if you don't become a citizen after the 5 years, you can renew the process. But I mean, I'm becoming a citizen as soon as I can. But for example, for like, I don't know, like people like my mom, where it's like taking a little bit longer for her because of COVID and everything, for her to get her citizenship, it's like it doesn't affect her, that because she can just renew it if she needs to. And even with her immigration process, like it was such a gift because like my stepdad couldn't go with her to the interview, and that is like unknown. Like people never, and people would tell my mom 24/7 like, you're gonna get denied, like people, like you're gonna show up to that meeting by yourself, because like my stepdad, like in that moment was like in trouble with the law, and like he couldn't leave the state. So like, and it was in Georgia. So my mom had her interview, and she was like, this is like all I have, like this is my future, like these are my kids, like I'm not going to like step down because I'm scared. And so like my mom's like, if they deny me, they denied me. Or if they reschedule my meeting, like my interview, they'll reschedule it. But I'm just going to do it, and I'm just going to go. And it was like God was with her, like literally, because she walked in the interview and she's like, look, my husband's not here, like showed him the report, showed him like why he couldn't leave, you know, the letter from his officer denying the request to leave the state. And he literally like, he opened up her folder and like sitting there was like, I think she said it was like the St. Jude's, like they both used to donate to like the St. Jude's cause for like cancer. And he opened it and saw that and like closed the envelope and just stamped her and was like, you're good to go, like you're approved. And my mom was like, what the heck? Like every single person told her, like even her lawyers. And they were like, you're going to get denied. It's going to be really bad. Like you need to reschedule. You need to request a reschedule. And she's like, no, like I cannot do this. I believe in the power of my God. Like she was like, I believe in God. I know he's good to me and he will be. And she just like did it all by herself.
It's so interesting that it's such a unknown system or an unknown process of like even the fact that in your whole interview process of having one inside the States and being like, I don't know what this means, and like the hope of that, and then it being dashed because he said, I don't know why you have this interview. You're not supposed to. This is wrong. I can't accept. Like just the whole thing. I can't imagine how the basically emotional upheaval, that constant like almost not knowing what's going on, right? Of just like, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how this is supposed to work. All the ways that I've heard that it's supposed to go, it's not really going that way. And I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has their own, like everyone's immigration case is unique. And that's the biggest like comment, I think, like overall thing is that's what a lot of immigrants say. Like you can only compare yours to another person like slightly, you know, everybody's like some processes are the same, but you know, you could get denied and the other one approved and they didn't have the same things. Like it literally just like people say it's a luck, like just who you get, like what officer you get in the day, like what mood they're in. Like it's just your hands are in the, like your life and your documentation is in the hands of whoever you get in that moment. Like whoever opened your folder, if they were in a bad mood or they were like happy, or if they just like they were like, nah, I don't like that, bye, you know, like. And that's the fear of it, is because it's not, you don't know who you're facing in that moment.
What do you wish that the people inside the system would know?
I don't know if they don't know this, but like we're real, you know, people with like real lives and real families and futures, that it takes one little like one I don't care to ruin the possibility that some like the future of what somebody had in mind, you know. And it's like and I think to like the immigration officers that like came to my house and like did those things and like said those things, it's like I was a girl, I was a baby, like imagine yourself in that position and like your kid going through that, you know. And like, you know, it's like what I tell my friends all the time that don't really understand. I'm like, what would you do for your babies? Like, what would you do for a better future if you're eating beans and rice every day on the floor, sleeping without a roof over your head? Or in my case, getting, you know, gas bombs thrown in your home at 3 years old. I know what a gas bomb feels like because I experienced it when I was like 3 years old. The government was throwing gas bombs to my house because they just wanted to. It's like that is what immigrants run from. The constant fear. I mean, people are willing to live here in the U.S. in terror every day. Don't run a red light. Don't stop at the stop sign completely. Oh my gosh, there's a cop behind me. Okay, everybody stop. You know, don't talk about it. I would take that 100% over going home, sadly, because it's like that is what you experience. You know, I mean, there's a lot of good times, but when it's bad, it's really bad. And so I think that that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's like people don't leave their homes and their comfort and the language they know and the food that they know and the streets that they drive every day because, and like up and leave and go to a country where they're like hated just because like, oh, kicks and giggles, like, let me just leave everything behind. Immigrants have, my grandfather died and one of his children could go see him. Wow. And mourn him. Like, I couldn't go, my uncles couldn't go, like, you know, my aunts who lived here in Miami, like the other side, like no one could go because all of us were stuck. And like, did we choose this life? 100%. And would we choose it again? Yes. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard and doesn't mean that it's not like traumatic. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect our, like the children in our lives. You know, it's like no one is making this decision because they're just like laying one day watching TV deciding like,
yeah, that looks easy.
Yeah, let me just go do that.
Yeah.
And the ones who have left.
Yeah.
Because the struggle is too much. And that's the thing is like, and am I saying like that there shouldn't be laws? No, there should be. And there are people who deserve to get deported and people who deserve to get sent home. But there's people who don't deserve it. And so sadly, because of one bad seed, the rest of the seeds pay for it. And so like there's so many different ways to do immigration, and I'm not an expert and I don't claim to be. I just like know my story, I know what I'm saying, and I know that it's like this is my experience, and like it was hard and it wasn't pretty, but that doesn't mean that I like know it all either, and it doesn't mean that I'm telling someone how to live their life or how to think or what to believe. I'm just like sharing my experience, and I believe my experience relates to a lot of other immigrants because it's real. It's part of who they are. It's part of who we are, like being undocumented and, you know, experiencing the, like, sadly, the closed-mindedness behind it. And, like, you know, I don't take away from people believing that there should be laws and that whatever, like, whatever people believe. Don't even want to get into it, but, like, have compassion. Like, that's all that people ask is for people to have compassion and grace for those of us that are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Because there's a couple things of, it wasn't you as a 4-year-old saying, me, Dory, want to go to America. It's, you're a child. A choice was made for you, whether it was good or bad. When you're a child, the choices are made for you, and there should never be any blame on you. And then the second portion of that is the amount of ignorance, because before I met you, you know, I'm as Caucasian as it gets. I'm full of privilege and have so much ignorance. It's unbelievable. And so it's so important to hear your story and to know what you personally experienced, even though, like you said, everyone's going to experience it different. The amount of us living in fear and isolation about something in our life is one thing. And then the number of people living in fear and isolation because of immigration status is something else. And it's, if there can be hope brought into that story, if you could have known from the get-go, like, just because your documentation your process isn't fully done, like, you can feel safe and you can feel known and you can feel loved, and you don't have to walk around and feel like you're half a person and you're hiding half of who you are. And I wish that could have been your story, and I hope that you sharing this can help a different story be someone else's life, where it's not all about let me hide half of who I am because of the surmountable fear. And I'm just so proud of you for sharing what you've been through. I'm so proud of you for giving a voice to the people who are mistreated within the process, and for giving a voice of people of culture. to us who are ignorant and need to know and need to be educated so that we can learn the truth and actually extend love. It's really cool.
Thank you for like listening, and if I can give hope to anyone, and like any little girl or frick any 30-year-old, it doesn't really matter like the age, but like it's not who you are. It doesn't define you. It's not who you are meant to be. It's not this thing like
The process is not the identity.
yeah, like that's not who God made us. Like God didn't label us like that, you know. We're his daughter, his son, his treasure, his masterpiece. Like doesn't really, and it seems scary, and I mean obviously like I'm on the other side, so it's easier to say it, but there's hope.